Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Titcomb with Peak InfoSec. We're an authorized CMMC third-party assessment organization. What that means is we spend a lot of our time right now auditing and assessing DoD contractors and their need to get ready for cyber certification in order to keep doing work for DoD. A lot of the research grants and everything else are all involved in this, so it's a interesting time frame as this is a new requirement hitting the United States.
Great to meet you, Matt, and be with you here together. I'm with Suj as well. I'm Jyoti Balani. I'm founder and managing director of FreshRiver.ai. We're a hybrid AI strategic consulting and product company. We work with Fortune 500 companies, helping them strategically assess use cases to deploy AI. Our product is actually a first of its kind private LLM as a service where we're training large language models to be deployed on the inside of the walled garden of enterprises to protect their data and to be auditable. It's great to be here and excited to talk about the impact of AI on procurement teams and supply chain. Suj?
Yes, thank you, Jyoti. Good morning, everybody. This is Sue Chandrasekhar with Strategic Insights. We are a business strategy firm specializing in market research, data analytics driven strategies. So we are helping Fortune 500 companies as well as a lot of educational institutions in workforce development, getting the next generation workforce ready to be digitally resilient. So we have trends that show how organizations need to have suppliers and educational institutions need to train workforce to get us all ready for AI. Delighted to be here and share some of our insights.
So one of the areas we wanted to talk about today was around the shifting landscape of certification. And really, while compliance doesn't create security, it tends to catalyze it, in my experience. And we know right now for what we're doing, DoD and the federal government's kind of said, well, thank you, commercial sector, you're getting our intellectual property, but you're not protecting it. And we saw the same thing, right after the Target breach, when everybody realized companies weren't protecting cardholder data. And so suddenly we saw a whole ecosystem spin up around that. And we're seeing the same thing. I'm actually at a university this week because they're at risk of losing all their grants and research because they're not handling that information properly. So it's kind of those fun ones. How are you guys seeing the impacts of cybersecurity compliance impacting what you guys are doing?
Well, in manufacturing research, something we have done, Matt, it's upfront and center. So we are helping a lot of the small, medium-sized manufacturers become smart factories. And the number one concern they have is cybersecurity. And I think the number one probably objective is to have cybersecurity capability internally as well as shore themselves up so they can go the pathway of becoming enterprise-wide, ready for smart factory upgrades. So that's clearly a trend. And we see that in the skilled trades as well, where every company from construction companies to companies providing HVAC services, this is a top priority because everything is going the digital route.
Yeah, I'd say, we have this inside out view because we work exclusively for enterprise clients and of course, the government sector and nonprofit. What we are seeing is that there is a big gap in frameworks around cybersecurity. As we know, AI and in particular Gen AI has been exploding and even the bad actors have access to it. So if we don't get our frameworks moving at the speed of how the bad actors are moving, we're going to find the phenomenon of people getting attacked. What we're telling our clients is you're at risk right now because the bad guys have already got access to tools that can move much faster than your annual auditing assessments or your standard frameworks. So you got to go lock your front door and all your entry points, which is why we're actually using AI and Gen AI itself to try and protect their borders. In fact, we just had a great conversation yesterday with a team that does cyber insurance, and they're saying the same thing. They said, no matter how much technology and standards we put in for cybersecurity purposes, the bad actors are always a step ahead. So I think we just have to move faster. I think the DoD, as you pointed out, Matt, came out with the updated framework. NIST has been worked on for the last few years. I just feel like we've got to change the framework or how we develop frameworks for standardization. So that's that gap that I think we're seeing between adoption and how fast the bad guys are moving.
Interesting part on that one, in talking to some of my peers down the road, actually, from where I'm at, is NIST. And talking to them, they're actually changing the way they're doing, especially the underlying 853 Rev framework. It's actually going agile. And they're going to be iteratively updating that as they go. It's not immediately like, oh, we're going to go make a change to a control just overnight. But we're not waiting multiple years now. And so they're going to try and learn to become more flexible and adaptable, which I think is great, because the other thing they're also doing is they're trying to coalesce a lot of the, especially with the latest version of it, they're really trying to make it more agnostic. So it's not just a federal tool, it's now usable by everybody in the commercial sector, and eventually collapse HIPAA, the NIST CSF, all of that are going to be kind of like what ISO is doing. That's going to become the main set of security controls we all should be looking at, and then figure out which ones work best for your environment.
Yeah, actually, I have a paradigm shift idea. I think we're going to have to use private LLMs or LLMs in general, this Gen AI technology, to actually generate frameworks. Because how best do humans understand AI in order to produce the frameworks? I think we have to leverage these tools themselves to say, how do you protect against this? You know what I'm saying? It's like this paradigm shift of rethinking, because technology was moving at a clip over the last 25, 30 years, right? If you think about web and cloud and mobile, we had time to catch up. We don't have any time to catch up. And the only way you can fight fire with fire is with fire. So I think we have to really rethink how we develop standards, and it's got to be 24/7, 365 days a year. Others are going to have these gaps where the bad guys can get in. Actually, Suj, you were talking about some of the research on here. What are you finding relative to frameworks around some of the organizations internally? What are they saying when they see releases by standards bodies coming out with this? Any reaction you're seeing?
Well, I think, first of all, I think the whole thing is very, very overwhelming. So it depends on the segment, right? And this is where I think Jyoti and Matt, we have such a wonderful topic here, because the implications are twofold. One is the implication of me as a supplier, right, to a very large corporation. Like, I'm talking about the manufacturing, because I think that is probably one of the most vulnerable sectors right now. Small, medium-sized manufacturers. I think there is a huge national initiative. I was just in DC the other day for a roundtable, and we're very concerned about the health of our manufacturers and their ability to sustain themselves in light of what is being demanded. So the overwhelming happens at two levels, right? One is there are too many frameworks. I don't know which to select. And there are, and the secondly, I can barely keep up with what I have to do on an operational level day to day and be competitive, and for me to deal with this. So where I'm going with this is, your question is well poised. I think in terms of these larger issues of selecting frameworks, selecting what we call in manufacturing as the magic 15, there are 15 different enablements of AI that happen in a smart factory, leading anywhere, right, from enterprise-wide management all the way to the supply chain. Each of them is so daunting. So I think providing a lot of guidance through private-public partnerships, we really need the states to kind of have hubs to provide those kind of guidance. So what we're hearing is, we are scared, we don't know how to navigate this, and we need help.
Yeah. So we might as well run to the heart of it, right, Matt? Where the tariffs coming in and our manufacturing in the U.S. and global. Let's just dive right into it. I think our audience might be very interested in, that impact. What do you think, Matt?
This is transforming business in so many different ways, which has got serious concerns because it's now a new tool. And I think all of us here have gone out. I've gone on OpenAI and I've played with it, created some things like, oh, let's see if I can get a website. And the first concern is, well, wait a minute, we're putting our information into this tool.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've got intellectual property concerns. Did I just give up rights? We know that's already happened. And so we're starting to see, even within, I think it's OpenAI is now available to the government and the government's clouds and, different levels of security clouds. And the ones where people are starting to leveraging them, they're starting to realize, like, first I got to stop the use of all that other stuff out there. And it's always that new problem, but it's a new old problem. It's the shadow IT, but now it's shadow AI IT. And so getting a handle on that's going to be the first boundary. Figuring out how best to exploit it. In my sector in cybersecurity, it's funny, I was talking to one of the leaders in Microsoft when they were playing with, a year and a half ago, Copilot for Security. That ties into the back end of Microsoft that's now available. That was critical even back then when they were just starting to muck around. That's how they've been finding all these vulnerabilities as they're being attacked because, as you pointed out, this is the bleeding edge where now they're using that tool to think, and it's not stopping, but it's not just doing an analytic, it's doing that kind of fuzzy looking at stuff. And those are the areas that honestly I find most intriguing because if one side's going to use it, we definitely need to be using that same capability as much as we can to defend ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things we're pointing out to enterprises and governments, it's, they're like, well, we're thinking about adopting AI. I said, well, you're already exposed to AI because all your vendors are using it. Like you mentioned, Copilot or ServiceNow or like, right, Salesforce, fill in the blank, any SaaS provider that's saying, oh, look, we're doing Gen AI because, they're trying to show their shareholders, hey, we're in the AI business too, because they're, along with capitalism. But when you take a look at organizations that are using these services, they are now exposed and these standards are not strong enough yet to protect. And they don't know what they don't know about how well their vendors, for example, their supply chain, which can be this attack vectors coming in through those borders. So we're saying the digital borders are now very exposed. And I think it is going to take AI to go secure them. And there's many tools coming out. I think Palo Alto just made an acquisition about a company where, it needs to go look at where the vulnerabilities are, but we have to speed that up. I want to talk topics a little bit into, the tariff tsunami, because I think that's front and center and, Suj mentioned manufacturers. So let's shift gears into understanding how our organizations, small, medium, large, doesn't really matter. Everybody's in the game. We're so globalized and interconnected. How are they going to adapt to these changing waves of tariffs that have been around forever in having sustainable businesses? I mean, this is now, an issue of existential. There's small businesses they actually gone out of business because of the tariffs that have come in. I mean, this is massive impact. So if we were to say, what are these strategic steps? So let's say top 3 things that manufacturers can do, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, even large businesses, to start to put things in place to go, okay, A, I got to protect myself. We talked about cybersecurity, but B, I got to make sure I'm a going concern because now my suppliers, if let's face it, a huge percentage coming from China, what, 30% or so from the inbound shipping that's coming in. How are we going to help organizations, do step by step, like make sure you're doing analytics? And I can tell you one thing, traditional analytics tools are not going to help. If you look at Power BI or Tableau. So we're actually training LLM models to do, millions of points of trend analysis to see where the top 20% that produce 80% of their revenue, where is the impact? And start to say, okay, you need to switch suppliers. Can you find somebody in the US or where the tariffs have not hit yet? And it's going to be a continuous game. That's why I feel like we got to look through to this technology itself, AI, to help to start to plug these problems before it's too late for many organizations. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, so you're bringing up a very tangential one. We're seeing the same thing because DoD, with the new cybersecurity compliance regime, is not only saying, "Hey, we're giving you this intellectual property. You now need to make sure everybody else that you're giving that same information to is compliant." But they're not stopping with that. They're potentially asking, "Well, wait, you're helping that company, and you've got access to that information, even though you're not helping to generate that product." You've got to be compliant. So we're seeing the same issue from a certification point of view impact the supply chain. And now it's like, okay, how do I find new partners? Who's qualified? And then now you're bringing up the other point of going, well, I may be able to go from vendor A. Vendor A may have better connections to get resources, but vendor B is compliant. Oh, crap. Now I've got a different set of risks issues now I got to deal with. And even just in talking to the people that are trying to figure out the vendor supply part, that is a huge issue. And we all know supply chain risk management is only going to continue to increase, whether it's from physical resourcing or cybersecurity or anything else. This is the growing issue, I think, for us in the next 10 years.
Yeah. So, Jyoti, you talked about frameworks at the very beginning. I think we also, from a systems standpoint, we need to start to help whoever, I think whichever business, especially manufacturers, since we're focusing on them, to adopt a framework-based approach. And by frameworks, I mean really a process, right? So we kind of look at it as, this is something that's been outlined by the U.S. Center for Advanced Manufacturing. I mean, a lot of research has gone into this. So they talk about a 3-step process. The first step is assessment. It's a fairly detailed assessment that we kind of conduct. I mean, there are 75 different parameters that a manufacturing organization goes through, where you assess, different parts of their supply chain. We assess internal functionalities. It's basically a readiness index kind of assessment. And then once that is done, based on some benchmarks, you kind of draw a roadmap for that particular organization, right? And that's a very iterative as well as a collaborative process. It's not like somebody comes from the outside. So this in itself does 2 things. One is, of course, it provides objective data and it kind of against benchmarks. The second, and probably the most critical thing we're finding now, is the internal hurdles to adoption of AI. There is huge adoption hurdles that we're seeing just because, they build, people just don't come and embrace it. So the roadmap process helps people internalize this. Then the third is really now that we have this, now let's just go and start to roll this out. So taking the 3 very, very macro level, whether it is at a functional level for cybersecurity alone, or whether it's enterprise-wide automation, I think adopting like a framework where we go from assessment to road mapping to, envisioning the rollout is probably going to be a good path to ensure not just adoption, but also retention and sustainability in the long run.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You can't manage what you can't measure. So you got to first understand the full risk in the assessment. But I feel like it's like a game of whack-a-mole, right? Like what Matt was talking about. Should I go protect my data, or should I go figure out which vendor should I go? So it's like all of a sudden, if you think about any organization of any size, it's strategy, people, process, tools, data, right? If you just think about these 5 things that make up any system, we're really talking about a multidimensional attack on A, the economics, but B, the security of the firm. Like you could crush a small company just by the weight of it. So, doing an assessment comprehensively across all these systems that have been built over, years, how do you do this so quickly? And, you don't have that much time because things are quickly, whether it's security vulnerabilities, whether it's the tariffs. So, the way I tend to think about this with my team is to say, look, guys, let's use the 80-20 rule. Find the top 20 parts of your system that depend and create 80% of your survivability, like existential. So where are your top 20% security vulnerabilities? Where are your top 20% economic, financial, your supply chain, your manufacturing? Like every part of the organization, if I think about, the CEO and all the functional groups, if every group went and ran what Suj you're talking about, do an assessment and find 20% of where your risk is and come up with your assessment, self-assessments. I think the assessment approach has to change, and everybody's got to go do more collaborative work. And, there's organizations like both of yours, right, that are helping companies be compliant with the security frameworks. But I think we're going to have to push the envelope, frankly, because I don't think we can depend on it. It's almost like you have to do self-evaluation, where I think teams have got to figure out how to move on just what the large organizations are giving us, right? So it's that plus what else do I need to do? Because it could be too late for a lot of organizations, right? And we can have that. It could be an economic collapse. I don't mean to be, alarmist, but it just is it's a little scary watching what's happening to small businesses. They're talking about it openly. Even those that supported, the voting for the administration, and not to get political, but I think we've got to figure out how to move more agile. I think you were talking about the agile piece. So I think that's probably the approach, doing many assessments.
Yeah, it's speed and scale, right? Which is two of the most difficult things to accomplish with accuracy. So it's the ultimate combination. And it is not, you're not an alarmist. I think, I think we've all been in business for decades. This is the first time where when this data come back, I kind of sit up and I'm like, oh my God, this is not looking promising, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we found, and the reason we actually exist is, interestingly, DoD put the cybersecurity compliance requirements in their contracts starting in 2017. Nobody was applying them.
Oh, wow.
And because it came back to the conversations, you brought up strategy, finance, risk. What's this? And businesses were like, well, if I'm not going to lose my business, then there's no need for me to reduce that risk. And DoD finally got to the point, their risk appetite got so bad with this issue, they said, we must now require third-party validations that you are actually implementing the security requirements we need you to implement. And that's the pressure when I'm dealing with executives. They're looking at this as an opportunity cost weight of going, if I do this, and we always hear cybersecurity is a lost revenue source, well, but I'm going to lose profit. I got to report to my board, pressure, everything else. And they tend to go, no. Now, interestingly, we had a client this year that we've been working with, and the technology is the easy part. The humans are the hard part in getting this done. Is they started on that journey, and they started going out, look, we are doing this. We're implementing. And they started selling the fact that they are implementing cybersecurity, and they've grown their business. They actually got certified in January, and they've doubled their revenue since then because they can show that they're doing this. And people want companies, especially in major defense ones, critical supply chains. They want companies that are doing cybersecurity, and it's a great way to grow a business, but it's an opportunity cost, and it's an investment. And I think that's the other part of this, is helping those executives to understand that this isn't just a sunk cost area. It's an area for you to help to market and grow your business in.
Yeah, it's a classic risk versus innovation, right? It's a constant balance. If you do too much, compliance and saying, oh, you got to dot all your I's and cross all your T's, then you're focused on that versus, making sure, in this case, protecting, making sure that you survive. But if you go all the way to the end and go, I'm not going to care about anything, especially in your field, Matt, if, you can't operate with the DoD if you don't have those certifications, right? But in the private sector, are people going to give that up to go, hey, we need to make sure we survive this. Otherwise, what's the point of having certification if we're not going to be around? So, sliding scale.
And we've seen some of that, after with PCI DSS for credit card holders. There's a lot more flexibility and risk acceptance with the mom and pop shops, et cetera.
Yeah.
But the larger firms, that starts getting more and more serious with the third-party validations, even in PCI DSS. And then once you're a processor, yeah, be ready to have a QSA come in and actually validate you're actually doing all of this. So we're seeing it in other sectors too. And I think that's only going to continue to increase, unfortunately, because us humans, yeah, we don't, I think as we were talking previously, our brain says, well, I'm not a target. Nobody's going to hit me. And you just kind of get to that point where that risk is amorphous and it's not there. But as I explained to people, hackers don't care. They're using these tools. They're running automated scripts. Their AI, their bots, they never stop. And they're always just looking for a vulnerability. And once they get notified of a vulnerability, yeah, now they'll bring the human in and figure out, how do we wedge that? How do we expand that? How do we make money off of breaking in and stealing from you?
Yeah, the scariest part is I was listening to a podcast, so where ransomware, and now people are not even reporting it, hospitals are just paying it. When the FBI is brought in, they're like, there's nothing we can do, you just have to pay it. I'm like, that cannot be the answer. So, actual attacks are just going to go up. I'm concerned about the government as well. It's very porous. Digital borders are very porous. And you're right, whether you're small, big, mid-size, private, public, nonprofit, Russia and China are coming for us. They have been coming for us for a while, interfering in our elections, taking our data. DeepSeek, just look at that, a Chinese produced model where they showed that smaller models, you don't have to be bigger models. They found social security numbers. They found our data in there. So, and Matt, you talk about the DoD saying, hey, you're handling our data. Guys, it's out there. I think we have to accept the fact that you can't protect your data. It is your family jewel. I think you have to go plug all your holes, at least the top 20% that you care about. Others you're going to let go. And it's existential. Suj, for manufacturers, I mean, this is big, right? Because of the tariff. How are you adapting to helping, your clients with that? I'm just very curious. Like, I don't know how they're going to solve this puzzle problem, right? We shift from suppliers from here to here and say, if you manufacture and sell the goods in that country, you're okay. But if you have a cross, border supply chain, how do you solve that problem?
Well, in most of our projects, the states are highly involved. I mean, we are involved in regional development as well. So the regional economic development authorities have to be engaged in this. This is not something that private sector can do on its own, because you may have to call your local congressman. You may have to kind of call upon your state senator to get some more information. That's the other thing. We don't have all the pieces of information. This is all still evolving in so many ways. So we strongly recommend that, this is literally a private-public partnership at this point. This is, if it is a one-off, I think we definitely can look at alternatives to sourcing, but we just don't want to send them down, up a garden path and then kind of say, oops, this. So we have to make sure that you're working with your local economic development authorities.
Yeah.
This has huge implications. Pardon me?
So, the question is, where are the forums, right? If you have to bring public, private, which is exactly right. I think we all have to collaborate in an unprecedented way because, to this point, last 25, 30 years, 40 years, everybody's kind of been doing their thing and things have been humming along. And then when you drop this, basically a bomb and everything sort of scattered, I think community is critical, right? I mean, conversations like this, right? I think Supply Gateway is doing a great job in bringing things together. People are looking for answers, and the private sector alone cannot do it. The government cannot do it alone. These are big, hairy questions that need to get audacious things that have to be looked at. Who should take the lead? You know, should it be government proactive pushing these conversations, or?
Well, in our case, we kind of initiated this, right? We're working. So this is our process. I can't speak for everybody, but I think this is where we're going in the manufacturing sector. We have great collaborations at the World Economic Forum level because they're leading a lot of the manufacturing global research, et cetera, and our research is very closely aligned with theirs. So you have data flowing in from there. The other is the trade associations. But for example, let's take the state of Iowa. We conducted a study, which was Strategic Insights kind of went ahead and conducted the study with some corporate sponsors. We kind of did a pulse check of about 200 manufacturers in the state. And then we took the report to our Economic Development Authority, and then the dialogue began. Because they are actually also juggling with a lot of things. Right? Yeah. And data is welcome, but insights are what matters. So we were able to kind of take to them and say, if these are the benchmark areas of what are the main concerns and how this needs to go, this is where our state stands. And and they've done this in Indiana, they've done this in Michigan, they've done this in Ohio. So on the other side of this, taking to AI, just not the tariffs. So the other thing is the workforce development piece, right? We have a big talent gap here. There are 3 different buckets of workforce. We have today's workforce, we have emerging workforce, future workforce. I think most states are grappling with this big scarcity in all 3. And we have now actually started working with community colleges and technical schools to make sure that our research gets to them so they can impact the curriculum and micro-credentialing needed to get the teams that are needed in the factories, right? So this as you rightly pointed out, and as Matt pointed out, this has to be very much kind of a very holistic view, not only private-public partnership from the viewpoint of, people in economic development, but also I would consider your trade associations, your chambers of commerce, and your higher education institutions.
Yeah. And what we're seeing is, as those DoD companies are trying to fight with their own supply chains, who's compliant, getting access to things, we're starting to see, I wouldn't say consortiums, but, message banks and things where they can say, we're compliant. Hey, we're looking for compliant partners. And then as they're starting to work together, they're starting to share, hey, we're able to get, these blocks of aluminum from this way or this way. And they're starting to see, even though China may be shutting down, well, there's now resellers is now becoming a new kind of industry of like, well, we're going to redirect through, save some money without the full-blown tariff. It still keeps things going. So industry is finding ways to keep working. It's just, it is going to cause an impact for both, whether it's cybersecurity or just physical resources.
Yeah, I think we're nearing the end of time. So let's start wrapping up. Let's do a quick lightning round, top 3 things that we want our audience to take away on what they should be doing. Suj, you want to start?
Sure. I think these are tough times, and it's very, very easy for us to get internally focused. That's what we all do. We put our heads down. I do that, right? If things get tough, actually, this is the time to start reaching out. The more data points you get from outside, the better off you are going to be in terms of being prepped, right? The second thing is make sure that you are well-resourced from a capital access standpoint. It's very critical because some of these things need huge investments, and there are a lot of sources. There is a lot of government sources. There are a lot of nonprofit sources who are all engaged in this. And that's also the first, if you do the first step, which is attending forums, getting out there, you're going to get better cues on where to go access this kind of capital that is not necessarily for a high interest rate, but something that is more of an innovation fund that you can access, right? And the third thing is, I think, Jyoti, both you and Matt, you kind of alluded to, let's make sure we have adherence to process. This is a very, very tough time where we see this, right? we see one grant, somebody got a grant and they went and fixed something with data analytics on one corner of the shop floor. And then somebody else got some other source of funding or ran into someone in a conference and did one little thing in cybersecurity. So while these are all good things and right things to do, they're not necessarily talking to each other. So very important then to be aligned internally.
Yeah, Matt, 3 things.
The main one I'm going to say is stop thinking of this year's P&L, have a 5-year plan. Really start thinking long-term. Look at this as a long-term investment. After that, tactically protect yourself. It's going to come back down to the basics. Patch, 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 patch as fast as you can, and deploy MFA everywhere. And I mean everywhere. Those are your 2 best defenses still today, other than the human. We can't fix the human problem, but where we can defend against the cyber threats, those are still your best things to do.
Yeah. And I would say, first thing is, and I agree with both of you, community, you gotta, heads up, everybody, have a conversation, call us, call other folks. Yeah. This is not the time to go, my business. I say talk to as many people to understand, what other people know, because I find this phenomenon when, we look at clients, the C-suite's all just internal focused. It's like, guys, you gotta look out, look what's happening outside. This is in the wild. It's coming at you. So that's one, start talking to the right people in the communities to understand and assess. And 2, when you take a look at your business, find that 20%, that 80% of your revenue, for example. At the end of the day, it's money. We're a capitalism-based framework. Look at that. And 3rd, don't be afraid. We're all going to get through this together. I believe in the U.S., United States, in the Constitution. I feel like every day I wake up, I'm thankful for the country we're in, and we got to band together because we have to make sure that we continue to grow and thrive. And so education, I think, is critical. I think the more we educate ourselves together, interaction without the borderlines of private, public sector, we're humans in the end. Matt, I love the fact you talk about it's human. These darn humans. we've created this problem, but I think we also have the ability to solve this together. So it was fantastic being with both of you. Fantastic conversation. Thank you. Emma Pinkerton, thank you, Supplier Gateway, for hosting us. Love to answer any questions that the audience has. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Emma.